The Tonight Show band played God Bless America. The audience stood up, and Vietnam veteran James Crawford walked onto the stage wearing his dress uniform, medals across his chest. It was Veterans Day, 1983. Johnny had planned a simple tribute, 5 minutes to say thank you to a man who'd served his country. But the moment James saw that standing ovation, he froze. His face crumpled, his shoulders shook, and in front of 20 million people, this decorated war hero started crying like a man who'd been holding back tears for 15 years. The audience didn't know what to do. Should they keep clapping? Sit down? Give him space? Johnny knew exactly what to do. He walked over to James, put his hand on his shoulder, and just stood there. Didn't try to make a joke, didn't try to move things along, just stood there with a crying veteran and let the moment be what it needed to be. When James could finally speak, his first words were, "I'm sorry." "I didn't mean to," Johnny cut him off. "Don't apologize. Not for this, not here, not ever." And then Johnny did something that had never happened on The Tonight Show. He canceled the rest of the show, sent the other guests home. And for the next 40 minutes, he sat with James Crawford and let him tell the story he'd never been allowed to tell. About Vietnam. About coming home to hatred, about feeling like he'd let everyone down by surviving. That night, Johnny Carson stopped being a host and became what James needed most, a witness, someone willing to hear the truth without judgment, without politics, just a man listening to another man's pain. November 11th, 1983, Veterans Day. Johnny Carson wanted to do something for Vietnam veterans, not a big production, not a political statement, just a simple acknowledgement. For 15 years, Vietnam vets had been treated like they'd done something wrong. They'd come home to protests, to anger, to a country that blamed them for a war they didn't start. Johnny thought the least he could do was say thank you, publicly, on The Tonight Show. So his producers reached out to the VA, asked if they could recommend a veteran who'd be willing to come on the show, someone who represented what these men had been through, someone who'd be comfortable on television. They suggested James Crawford, Medal of Honor recipient, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. The citations read like something out of a movie. James had saved 3 men from a burning helicopter under enemy fire, had carried them out one by one while being shot at, had gone back a 4th time to make sure no one was left behind. The president had shaken his hand. Newspapers had called him a hero, but James didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a survivor, and for 15 years he'd been trying to figure out what to do with that. When The Tonight Show called, James almost said no. He didn't like talking about Vietnam, didn't like being called a hero, didn't like the attention, but his wife convinced him. "Maybe it'll help," she said. "Maybe other guys need to see someone like you getting thanked." So James said yes. It was just 5 minutes, just a handshake with Johnny Carson. He could handle that. The day of the taping, James put on his dress uniform, the one he kept in the back of his closet, the one with all the medals he never wore. His hands shook as he pinned them on. His wife noticed. "You okay?" James nodded. He wasn't okay. But he'd learned a long time ago to say he was. Backstage at The Tonight Show, James sat in the green room trying not to throw up. A production assistant came in. "Mr. Crawford, you're on in 5 minutes. Johnny's just going to bring you out, thank you for your service, maybe ask you a question or two. Nothing heavy, just a nice moment." James nodded. Nothing heavy. He could do that. He'd been doing nothing heavy for 15 years. The band started playing God Bless America. That was his cue. James stood up, straightened his uniform, and walked through the curtain onto the Tonight Show stage. The lights hit him first, bright, hot. Then he saw the audience, all of them on their feet, clapping, some of them crying, 20 million more watching at home, all of them looking at him, thanking him. And something inside James that he'd kept locked down for 15 years broke open. He tried to stop it, tried to stay composed, stay strong. That's what you did. That's what veterans did. But he couldn't. The tears came, hard, painful, the kind that come from carrying too much for too long. James stood there in his dress uniform, medals across his chest, and cried in front of America. Johnny had been standing by his desk, ready to shake James's hand. But when he saw what was happening, he walked over. Didn't hesitate, didn't wait. Just walked over and put his hand on James's shoulder. The audience kept clapping, but it was different now, quieter, more respectful, like they understood they were witnessing something important. Johnny stood there with James, didn't try to fix it, didn't try to move on, just stood there, a silent message. I'm not going anywhere. Take your time. It took James almost 2 minutes to get himself together enough to speak. When he did, his first words were an apology. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Johnny cut him off immediately. Don't apologize. Not for this. Not here. Not ever. Johnny turned to the audience. James, everyone here understands. This is real. This matters more than anything else we could do tonight. Then Johnny did something unprecedented. He looked at the cameras, at the producers in the control room, and made a decision. We're going to do something different tonight, Johnny said. We had other guests scheduled. But I'm sending them home. Because James deserves more than 5 minutes. He deserves to be heard. The control room erupted. He's canceling the show? We have Bill Murray in the green room. The sponsors... But Johnny had already made up his mind. He walked over to his desk, pulled up a chair for James, and sat down next to him. Not across the desk. Next to him, like they were just two guys having a conversation. James, Johnny said quietly, tell me about Vietnam. Not the hero stuff, the real stuff, what it was actually like. James looked at Johnny, looked at the audience, looked at the 20 million people watching. And for the first time in 15 years, he told the truth. He talked about being 19 years old and getting drafted, about being scared every single day, about watching friends die, about the helicopter that went down, and how he'd gone back into the fire not because he was brave, but because he couldn't live with himself if he didn't, about the nightmares that started in Vietnam and never stopped, about coming home and being spit on at the airport, about people calling him a baby killer, about feeling like the country he'd served hated him for serving it. Johnny listened, really listened, asked questions, not to make it entertaining, just to understand. How do you carry that? Johnny asked at one point. How do you live with it? James shook his head. Honestly? Most days, I don't know. You just wake up and try to make it through. And you don't talk about it, because nobody wants to hear it. They want you to be a hero or they want you to be a villain, but they don't want you to be a person. I want you to be a person, Johnny said. Right now, on this show, you get to be a person. Not a symbol, not a hero, just James. And whatever you need to say it. So James did. He talked about the guilt, about why he survived when others didn't, about feeling like he'd failed because he couldn't save everyone, about the anger at a government that sent kids to fight a war it didn't know how to win, about feeling betrayed by the very country he'd served. The audience was dead silent. Some were crying. This wasn't what anyone expected from The Tonight Show, but it was what everyone needed to hear. 20 minutes in, Johnny asked, what do you wish people understood about Vietnam vets? James thought for a moment that we were just kids. Most of us were 18, 19. We didn't know anything. We just did what our country asked us to do, and when we came home, we got blamed for it. Like it was our fault. Like we'd wanted to go. His voice broke. I just wish someone had said thank you. Not for the war, for carrying what we carried, for doing what we were told and then dealing with the consequences alone. Johnny looked at the camera. When he spoke, his voice was firm, clear. Then let me say it now. On behalf of everyone watching, James, thank you. Not just for your service, but for carrying a burden that should never have been yours alone, for being strong when the country asked you to be strong, and for being honest tonight when it would have been easier to pretend everything was fine. Johnny paused. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry it took us 15 years to say this properly. I'm sorry we made you guys carry this alone. That wasn't fair. That was never fair. James broke down again, but this time it was different. Not the tears of someone breaking, the tears of someone finally being seen. 40 minutes. That's how long Johnny sat with James Crawford. 40 minutes of raw, honest conversation about war and guilt and coming home to a country that didn't want you. The other scheduled guests never appeared. Bill Murray watched from the green room and told producers, "Don't interrupt this. This is more important than anything I could do." When the show finally ended, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. James stood there, still crying, still in his dress uniform. Johnny stood next to him, and America watched two men share a moment that was 15 years overdue. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The NBC switchboard was flooded. 50,000 calls in the first hour. Veterans calling to say they'd been crying along with James. Families calling to say they finally understood what their fathers, brothers, sons had been through. And most powerfully, hundreds of veterans calling to say, "Thank you for letting us see that. Thank you for letting us know we're not alone." The next morning, newspapers across the country covered it, not as entertainment news, as a cultural moment. Carson's Veterans Day tribute becomes national catharsis, read one headline. Critics who normally reviewed comedy were writing about grief, healing, and what it means to honor service without glorifying war. For James, the impact was personal and immediate. He'd spent 15 years feeling like he had to hide his pain, had to be strong, had to pretend he was fine. But Johnny had given him permission to be honest. And in front of 20 million people, James had said the things he'd never been allowed to say. The nightmares didn't stop after that night. The guilt didn't disappear. But something changed. James started talking to other veterans, started going to support groups, started admitting that he wasn't okay and that was okay too. "Johnny gave me permission to be human again," James said years later. "For 15 years, I thought I had to be the hero everyone wanted me to be. Strong, unbreakable. But Johnny let me be broken. And that's what I needed. Not to be fixed, just to be seen as I actually was." More than that, Johnny's decision to cancel the rest of the show sent a message. This matters more than entertainment. A veteran's pain matters more than celebrity interviews. Truth matters more than the schedule. Other talk shows started paying attention, started inviting veterans on, not as props, as people. Started having real conversations about PTSD before it was really called that. About what war costs the people who fight it. About how we treat the people we send to do things we're not willing to do ourselves. Johnny didn't fix the way America treated Vietnam veterans. One show couldn't do that. But he started a conversation, opened a door, showed that it was possible to honor service while acknowledging cost, to thank veterans while admitting we failed them. James Crawford lived another 30 years after that Tonight Show appearance. He became an advocate for veteran mental health, spoke at VA hospitals, helped other vets get treatment, and he always credited that night with Johnny as the beginning. "Before that, I thought asking for help meant I was weak," James said. "Johnny showed me that asking for help means you're human, and there's no shame in that." Johnny never talked much about that night publicly. When asked, he'd deflect. "I just let James talk, that's all." But people close to Johnny said it affected him deeply, made him think about how we use people and then discard them when they're no longer useful, how we ask people to sacrifice and then get angry when they show the scars. That night with James wasn't just about one veteran. It was about all of us, about how we treat the people who carry our burdens, about whether we're willing to hear the truth when it's uncomfortable, about whether we care more about feeling good or doing good. Johnny chose doing good. He could have stuck to the schedule, could have given James his 5 minutes and moved on to Bill Murray and the laughs, but he chose to cancel the show, to give James the space to be real, to let America see what we'd done to the people we sent to Vietnam. That's courage, not the battlefield kind, but the kind where you use your platform for something more important than entertainment. The lesson isn't just about veterans, it's about all of us, about how we treat people who carry pain. Do we give them space to be honest, or do we ask them to perform happiness? Do we listen? Or do we just want them to move on so we don't have to be uncomfortable? James Crawford needed someone to sit with his pain, not fix it, not minimize it, just witness it. Johnny did that, and in doing so, he showed us what real support looks like. Not advice, not solutions, just presence. Just, I see you. Your pain matters. Take all the time you need. If this story moved you, think about the veterans in your life, the ones who smile and say they're fine when you ask how they're doing. Maybe what they need isn't advice or pity. Maybe they just need someone willing to sit with the truth, to let them be real, to tell them they don't have to be strong all the time. Subscribe for more stories about the moments when compassion matters more than entertainment. Share this with a veteran who needs to know their pain is valid. And comment below, How do we better support the people who carry burdens for the rest of us? Because Johnny Carson taught us that night that the bravest thing you can do isn't fight in a war. It's come home and admit you're hurting. And the most powerful thing you can do for someone is just be there when they finally do.